Welcome to Cut and Thrust, your podcast for the bloody and sometimes bizarre journey through the Middle Ages. Whether it's dark battles, questionable hygiene, or hair-raising rulers, here you'll get history as it really was, raw and unfiltered. So grab your sword, put on your helmet, and let's dive into the wild world of the past.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Battle Merchant podcast. I'm Hendrik.
And I'm Carmen. Today we're talking about a topic that's really close to my heart: DIY Viking axes. How to design your very own individual axe.
Good, and before we get into the practical steps, we first want to clarify why the axe played such a special role for the Vikings. Because it wasn't just a simple tool.
True. Most people immediately think of swords when they think of Vikings. The classic image, right? But actually, axes were much, much more important in everyday life.
There's a very practical reason for that. Swords, especially the really good ones, like the famous Ulfbert blades, were extremely expensive. They were made of crucible steel, higher carbon content, virtually slag-free. That was high-tech for the time. This quality was absolutely exceptional and wasn't standard again until much later.
So, really only for the elite?
For important warriors, for the wealthy. The production was elaborate, the material cost enormous. An axe, on the other hand, a hard steel edge was welded onto a softer iron body. Much less complicated, much cheaper.
And the best part? You could use an axe for everything. Chopping wood, building ships, fighting when necessary. A sword was, well, a sword. Nice to look at, but for actual work...
Pretty impractical, exactly right. You could say the axe was the Swiss army knife of the Viking Age.
But still, the Vikings didn't just view their axes as mere utility items, did they?
Absolutely not. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating archaeological finds ever, the Mammen Axe. It was discovered in Denmark in 1868 in a burial mound near Mammen in Jutland, dated to approximately 970 AD.
What makes it so special?
It's a small iron axe, but it's decorated with silver, niello, and even gold inlays. Really elaborate work. The decorations show, how should I describe it, a mixture of Christian and pagan symbols. On one side, a tree motif. Could be the world tree Yggdrasil, but could also be the Christian tree of life.
Ah, so right in that transition period when Christianity was spreading through Scandinavia.
The axe was so significant that an entire art style was named after it, the Mammen style. And this wasn't a combat weapon. This was a ceremonial axe, an absolute status symbol.
And that's exactly what I find so exciting for us today. The Vikings didn't just keep their weapons purely functional. They were individually decorated, had personality.
Many Vikings customized their axes, those who could afford to. Carvings in the shaft, leather wrappings, maybe an inscribed symbol. The elaborate metal inlays, like on the Mammen Axe, were of course absolute elite stuff. But even a simple leather wrap made the axe your tool, your weapon.
And we can do exactly the same today. In reenactment, at medieval markets, in LARP, or just at home. A self-designed axe is something completely different from an off-the-shelf purchase.
Although you have to distinguish, do you want a purely decorative axe that beautifies your camp or your living room, or one that's actually functional and that you can really use?
For decoration, you can be a bit more flexible with materials. But if you actually want to use the axe, for splitting wood, for example, then you need solid components. Proper axe head, sturdy shaft, proper wedging. For stage combat, by the way, there are strict safety rules. Special blunt training weapons are often used, and real axes are frequently not permitted.
Absolutely. Safety comes first. But even with decoration, quality is worth it. A self-designed axe like this can complete your medieval outfit, enhance your camp,
or simply become your personal favorite piece. I've met people at cons who carry their self-decorated axe with so much pride. It's really wonderful to see.
And that's the beauty of it. You decide how your axe should look. Simple and functional, rustic with burn decorations, or elaborate with leather and fur. Your imagination has hardly any limits today. Historically, there were of course specific styles, Mammen, Ringerike and so on, and people worked with available materials.
In the next section, we'll look at what materials and tools you specifically need to get started. So, now it gets practical. Before we start, we first need the right materials. And the good news, the list is manageable.
That's true. At its core, there are only 3 things you absolutely need.
Axe head, shaft, and axe wedge. Those are the basics, plus paint or oil for surface treatment. And then there are the optional things. Leather scraps, fur scraps, maybe small nails for decorations.
The tools are similarly uncomplicated. Glue, scissors, hammer. Almost everyone has those at home. Plus a saw if you want to shorten the shaft. And a soldering iron if you want to get creative.
What many underestimate, the choice of shaft wood makes a huge difference. You shouldn't just use anything.
What would be your recommendation?
Ash is the classic choice. The wood has exactly the right mix of hardness and flexibility. It absorbs impacts without breaking. By the way, it was already the preferred material for axe shafts in the Middle Ages.
That makes sense. From the few surviving shafts and from practical considerations, we know ash was preferred. Wood rarely survives. Axe heads are often found in graves, but the shafts are almost always gone. Hickory is also often recommended today, but that's North American wood. The Vikings obviously wouldn't have had that.
For us today, hickory is still a great alternative. Very tough, very resilient. But if you want authenticity, go with ash.
Now to surface treatment. That's not just about looks, but also about protecting the wood.
Right, there are various options. Stain, oil, or wax. All 3 protect the wood while also giving it that
characteristic look. That's true. And the interesting thing, archaeologically, we don't actually know for certain what the Vikings themselves used. Animal fats, train oil, that sounds plausible, but isn't documented.
Really? I always thought that was established fact.
No, like with the shafts. Organic remains decompose over centuries. The shafts we find were usually in bogs or ship burials. Pre-treatment would have been irrelevant anyway. What we do today with oil and wax works excellently in any case.
Linseed oil is my favorite. Soaks in well, hardens, and the shaft feels really grippy afterward. Wax is more for the surface, as a finish, so to speak.
And stain?
Stain penetrates deeper and simultaneously gives the wood a color tone. If you want it a bit darker without painting over it, that's ideal. Some people also mix different techniques. Oil first for protection, then wax as a finish.
Sounds elaborate, but worthwhile.
It is. And then there are the, how should I put it? The more adventurous methods.
You mean charring?
Right. Lightly charring the shaft with a torch or Bunsen burner. That very lightly carbonizes the top layer and gives the wood that aged, weathered look. But be careful, only very lightly, otherwise you weaken the wood.
And always only dry wood. Damp wood can crack when charred.
Absolutely. And afterward, brush it off well, remove the charred residue. Then you can really see the grain beautifully.
What I also love is burning designs with a soldering iron, basically the modern form of historical pyrography. You can work real patterns into it.
It's like drawing, just with heat. Geometric patterns work great. Lines, zigzags, diamonds. If you're unsure, practice on a scrap piece first.
Historically speaking, the decorations were often simpler than you'd think. No long runic inscriptions. More like short symbols, craftsmen's signatures, geometric patterns.
So, no magical protective runes?
That's more modern interpretation. Archaeologically, we mainly find owner's marks or smith's marks on weapons and tools. The elaborate runestones that everyone knows, those were public monuments, not everyday objects.
Still, you can of course burn runes if you want. Looks good and makes the axe
personal. That's exactly what it's about. Your axe, your design.
And the nice thing about the soldering iron, mistakes can be carefully sanded over. So don't be afraid to experiment.
Although a bit of planning doesn't hurt. Maybe sketch on paper first what you have in mind.
Good point. And don't forget safety. When charring and soldering, always ventilate well. Use a fireproof surface and keep nothing flammable nearby.
In the next section, we'll get down to the nitty-gritty. Mounting the axe head and proper wedging. That's where most mistakes happen. So, now we're assembling. The moment when the individual parts become a real axe.
It sounds more complicated than it is. Basically, it's just 2 steps. Mount the axe head and wedge it. But the sequence is important.
So I'll do it the other way around. First you check whether the shaft has the right shape at the top. Many shafts taper slightly wider toward the top, so that the axe head fits over from above and then sits really tight with the wedge.
And then you slide the axe head over the shaft from the top. Not from below, from the top. The head slides down as far as it will go until it sits tight.
Exactly, and now comes the crucial part, the wedge. It's driven from above into the shaft, into that slot that sticks out above the axe eye.
It's actually an ingenious principle. The wedge spreads the wood
and presses it against the inner wall of the axe head. That makes everything rock solid.
Ah, that's why the head can't fly off forward. It's fixed from the inside.
And this isn't an optional extra. The wedge is safety relevant. Without proper wedging, the head can come loose, and then you have a real problem.
A flying axe head is no joke. So, really hammer the wedge in firmly. Better a few more strikes than too few. And after the first use, check again whether everything is secure.
What do you do if the wedge won't grip properly?
Then the slot is usually too narrow. With a fine saw, you can deepen the slot in the shaft end a bit. Not too deep, but enough for the wedge to have room to spread.
Good, so now we have a functional axe. But now comes the part that's really fun. Personalization.
And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Feeling curious? Then head over to battlemerchant.com. They've got all sorts of medieval stuff, from costumes to armor and loads more. Totally worth a look.
And there are many options. The most obvious is a leather grip. It doesn't just look good, it also has practical advantages.
In what way?
Leather gives you better grip, especially when your hands are damp. It also dampens vibrations when striking. And in winter, it's warmer in your hand than bare wood.
That's also probably why grip wrappings were likely used historically. Although, to be honest, there's little archaeological evidence for it.
That's like earlier with the wood treatment. We didn't know for sure there either.
We already know this problem from the shafts. Organic materials like leather don't survive the centuries. Most axe heads are found isolated, as I mentioned earlier. What we do today with wrappings is a plausible reconstruction, but not archaeological proof.
That makes sense. But the logic supports it. Leather was available, practical,
and easy to apply. The Vikings were pragmatic. If a grip wrapping improved the hold, they probably did it.
For the practical implementation today, you take a leather strip about 2 to 3 centimeters wide and wrap it spirally around the grip. Fix it at the beginning and end with a small nail. Today, glue works too. Historically, they would have used pitch.
What fascinates me about historical decorations is that they
weren't just for looks. That's often forgotten. A wrapping also helped to recognize your own axe. In the chaos of battle or in camp, where many similar tools were lying around.
True. Functional and individual. No contradiction.
As an alternative to leather, you can also use fur, but more for a decorative axe. It gives a wilder look, but is impractical for actual use and historically questionable.
Then they are purely decorative straps. They don't have to wrap around the entire grip. A few bands below the head, maybe with small metal rings or beads, that's often enough for a strong effect.
And that's exactly what we mean by personalization. Your axe should suit you. Simple and functional? Elaborately decorated? Both are legitimate.
Among the Vikings, by the way, there was an interesting difference between work axes and ceremonial axes. The Mammen Axe, for example, was so elaborately decorated that it certainly never chopped wood.
While a normal farmer's axe might have just had a simple leather wrapping, or none at all. It was a utility item, not a display piece.
And for us today, that means decide what your axe should be. Should it hang in camp and impress? Or do you actually want to work with it?
For a work axe, I'd skip too many bells and whistles. A good leather wrap, solid wedging, done. For a decorative axe, you can really get creative. So, now we have a finished axe. The question is, where does it go?
That depends, of course, on what you plan to do with it. The possibilities are varied.
In LARP, an axe like this is a real eye-catcher. But, as with stage combat, as a weapon you need padded weapons, and many events prohibit steel axes in the play area completely. Check the rules beforehand. If allowed, then only secured in camp or backstage.
In reenactment, it's similar. An authentically designed axe simply belongs there. Whether on your belt, in hand for photos, or as part of a living history display.
And then, of course, there's home decoration. Over the fireplace, on the wall in the study, next to your book collection on Norse history.
Oh yes, a Viking camp in the evening, the fire crackling, and your axe hanging on your tent frame. That really is something special.
Which brings us to safety. When you're transporting the axe, remember, you shouldn't carry it openly in public, even if it's just a tool.
Weapons laws are sometimes complicated on that. Safest, transport the axe well packed, in a bag or wrapped up. Events usually have their own rules that you should check in advance.
As medieval markets and cons, it's usually not a problem. Axes are part of the setting there. But on the way there, better not visible.
Now to maintenance. If you want your axe to last long, you need
regular attention. The head should be kept dry and lightly oiled occasionally. Prevents rust.
With the shaft, it's similar. If you've treated it with oil, re-oil occasionally. The wood stays supple and doesn't crack.
And after every use, do a quick check. Is the wedge still tight? Is the head wobble-free? That's 2 minutes that are well worth it.
What do you do if the wedge has come loose?
Then just drive it back in. A few hammer strikes and it's secure again. If the wedge has slipped through completely, you need a new one. But that rarely happens with good initial work.
The nice thing about a DIY project like this is you really get to know your tool. You know exactly how it's assembled, what you need to pay attention to.
And that exactly, well, That's what makes the difference. The connection to something you created yourself. That's something completely different from an off-the-shelf purchase.
The Vikings would have understood that. For them, an axe was never just an object. It was part of everyday life, part of their identity.
That's why I want to encourage everyone who's heard this.
To just get started, that's the point. It doesn't have to be perfect.
The first self-designed axe won't be perfect, but it will be yours. And that's what counts.
And if something goes wrong, you learn from it. The second project will be better.
The materials are manageable. You usually already have the tools. The biggest step is actually getting started.
If you've gotten the urge to start after this podcast, at battlemerchant.com you'll find axe heads, shafts and accessories. And on the blog there are many more topics about history and craftsmanship.
It's worth taking a look, not just for axes.
And with that, we've reached the end of this episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Until next time, and have fun crafting.
Bye.
And so we ride towards the end of this episode. Keep your sword sharp and your mugs full. We'll catch you in the next one.